I'm Chris Como. I'm here with Brandel Chamblee and Lucas Wald, and we are taking a deep dive into golf instruction. Okay, Brandel, why do you hate golf instructors? I'm kidding, right?
No, don't.
No. But you've been critical, right? You've been critical of golf instruction. Like, take me through your thoughts on this, and let's talk about it.
Because in the 80s, I would say that the ideas that came to the forefront of teaching were based upon ill-conceived philosophies about things that teachers had read that didn't actually happen. So I think the origin of bad instruction for 2, 3, 4 decades really has been in Hogan's book. And in Hogan's book, 5 Fundamentals, he talks about resisting, he talks about maintaining flex in the right leg, he talks about having the inner elbows pointed out, he talks about having a weak grip, he talks about having a steady head. So all of those ideas, all of those words were taken as fact. And then they were echoed by one teacher after another after another.
So I'm going to jump in. I think this is a really important point. When we're studying golf swings as coaches, as players, whatever, it's easy to look at what a player feels, right? What their experience of it is. Golf ball doesn't know a player's thoughts, doesn't know the teacher they're going to, it doesn't know what they're working on. It just knows what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Ben Hogan was talking about his feels, what he thought he was doing.
Right?
That's not what the ball knows. It just knows what he did.
Absolutely.
So this is where we have to be careful when studying the works of a player. There can be some interesting things to pull out of that, but at the end of the day, we have to study what they actually did, the footage of their swing,
right,
not just what they're writing about and what they're thinking
right.
about.
If that idea that you just expunged, if that idea pervaded in the 50s, we wouldn't have gotten in all this trouble. If someone had come along and said that, we wouldn't have gotten in all this trouble.
And I think we have access to so much more information these days than we did then. We have YouTube. We can go back now and not guess what Ben Hogan did. We know what Ben Hogan did from a movement standpoint. I didn't have it growing up. We just sort of read the books and thought illustrators in the books got the pictures right. But now when we look at YouTube and we type in a Ben Hogan or Mickey Wright or Sam Snead, we can see that he clearly didn't resist with the lower body. He clearly didn't have his lead elbows pointed down like this, right? So I think technology it takes the guesswork out of things.
So to be fair for the people then, they didn't really have access to a lot of the stuff we did. So, I mean, maybe the conclusions they came to were based off what they had, and what they had was limited, and it created, anytime you have like limited information or information that can be misleading, you come to misleading conclusions.
So what ended up becoming the most popular ideas in teaching were not the best ideas, they were from the best salesmen, let's call them, because they're selling an idea. And so the idea became accepted as fact that if you resist with the lower body, you build up more torque. A whole host of things went along with that. But all through the 80s, almost every popular book, written magazine article that ran on the cover was about maintaining the flex in the right leg, okay? Keeping your hands in front of you, whatever that means. I guess that meant here, right? So, if I carried those ideas to their completion, it would look like that, right?
And set the hinge early too.
Set
and
the
open
hinge,
the face.
Set the hinge early.
Get the toe up in the air like that.
Open the face, right?
Chasing certain aesthetics that really don't
relate
to necessarily a good ball strike.
But that's when I'm playing the tour.
Yeah.
And so you go to the supposed, air quotes, best teacher, and that's what they're teaching. And not only that, because that teacher is so popular and on the cover of every magazine, he's got acolytes around him.
Yeah, sure.
So here they go off into the teaching world, and he's got 50 of them one year, and 50 of them the next year, and 50 of them the next year. And then they go out, and they each get acolytes, because they all gain some foothold in the teaching industry.
There's a little bit of an appeal to authority, and then it becomes a sort of
So the next thing you know,
mass.
teaching is pervaded with a flawed idea. I'm taking lessons from those teachers. So when you say, why do you hate teachers? I don't. They're my best friends. I love you guys, all right? I love sitting around talking golf swing. I've always enjoyed that. But it's the ideas that I rage against, not the teachers. It's just the ideas. I mean, teaching's not unlike golf. You go out to teach, sometimes you make a bogey.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you play golf, you make a bogey. I just think the whole industry was over par for about a decade or two. There were good teachers out there.
Sure.
They just weren't the most popular teachers.
one of the things I've always argued against, and on the flip side for, is how do we define what's good and bad in a golf swing? And I have issues when the definition of good comes from a person maybe doing thought experiments, theorizing what they think should happen in a golf swing. Maybe it's a certain aesthetic or whatever. To me, my argument is that even the smartest person in the world, and they come up with this theory of what should happen in a golf swing, that's not smarter than the collective trial and error of everybody who's ever hit a golf ball. So for example, there's been millions and millions of people who have hit a golf ball over the last, say, 100 years. Out of that massive trial and error, only a handful of great ball strikers have come out of it. The Ben Hogans, the Trevinos, the Nicklases, whoever. There's more intelligence that's contained in that massive trial and error where these greats have come out of. So because of that, really the answer to what's good and bad in a golf swing is, and this is where I think we're all on the same page, is seen with the great ball strikers. Instead of creating this sort of theoretical definition of good and bad, we just need to look at what the guys actually did that hit it great, and then try to better tease out what is good and bad from that example.
That's right.
Those examples.
And that's where I think social media has been great, because I think the industry needed peer review. It didn't have it. It just had whatever was popular pervaded. But now, social media, if you put an idea out in the teaching world, and almost every teacher is on social media, and they put it out on YouTube or whatever, put an idea out, it gets scrutinized by all your peers. It gets tested against what they think, what they believe, and then they also go dig in video, and they're like, where's the evidence of this?
Awesome.
And you get this great peer review.
It's great.
As much as I raged against teaching for eons, I am now, I feel like, pretty darn complimentary of it, because I think teaching has gotten massively better as social media has become more and more prevalent in our lives.
That's my sentiment, right? I think it's the death of the guru. It's not this person who kind of has this special information that they're keeping tight to them. It's really just about, hey, people who are trying to gather all this sort of like understanding of the body, maybe some physics, whatever it is, what the ball needs to do, the history of great ball strikers, and then become dynamic problem solvers to help the person in front of them.
That's right. Now, I no longer need the periodicals to tell me who the best teachers are. Nobody does either. Okay? All you need to do is go on YouTube. You can do it on your own. You can just go on and who's got the best ideas? Who's having the most success? You can get both. You can get the quantitative, the qualitative. You can get the esoteric and the empirical, the nuanced and the obvious. You can go anywhere you want, and you can find who the best teachers are, who's getting the best results. That's why congrats, you guys, you're killing it, right? You're having great success, but it's measurable success. And then you can look at it empirically and go, oh, you're right. You're teaching things that Hogan, Nelson, and Snead did 100 years ago.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
It's so much more about not being right, but getting it right for a lot of the new generation of teachers. And I think that's just a very important distinction, right? It's not, hey, I got it. It's more like, look, we're all trying to, like you're saying, peer review. We're trying to get it right. And I'm actually very sort of optimistic about where teaching is right now and where it's going.
Well, I'm encouraged too, Chris. The last few years, we've seen swings come out on the PGA Tour, LPGA Tour, that it's not this robotic look anymore. We see athletic moves come on the scene like Matt Wolff or Victor Hovland.
We're not chasing these weird sort of symmetries or sort of like aesthetics. It's more about what's the functionality.
We're not eliminating, and I think coaching has led to that too. You take Genghis coaches Matt Wolff. He protected that kid's talent. He maybe had some of those idiosyncratic movements as a 10-year-old, but he protected those. He didn't change things and try to stamp his theory on a kid like Matt Wolff.
In general, it's more about, let's respect what works and not try to arbitrarily change stuff.
When we went to an LPGA event, I was covering it. Lucas came out, and he came back. He goes, look, I don't know who's doing what out here, but that is the best golf swing.
They didn't have nameplates on the. I don't think they had the.
You just had the video of it.
We just walked by, and I'm like, that girl right there has got the moves.
And
shortly after, she got second, I think, that week. It was fun.
Right.
Okay, what about technology? You've been critical of technology as well.
You may be talking about TrackMan and Flight Scope, and yes, I have, because I think there's an addiction to it. And look, I have those machines, and if I taught, I would certainly have them and use them. But I think there's a tendency to get on them and get addicted to the club head speed and the ball speed, and it becomes all about that. And I've got several friends on tour. I watch them do this, and they play the launch monitor game, which is, what can I do? How can I get my ball speed up? How can I get my, and look, after I use those machines for a bit, I still maintain, I don't need them. I do not need them. I can tell you when I'm down. I can tell you when I'm out. I can tell you when I'm across it. I can tell you when I make a good swing. I can tell you what it feels, because those machines can give you the numbers of what a good golf swing Well, it is, but they can't tell you what it feels like. And you play with feels. And now, I mean, okay, if you can match up your feels with those numbers, yeah, maybe you're a little bit more educated. But I think they're pretty expensive, and that expense is passed on to your students.
I don't actually think they can tell you what a golf swing is, because to me, they're just telling you what's happening on that one impact. And a big part of a good golf swing is the whole range of shots that you're hitting. And these things aren't telling you that. They're not explaining where consistency comes from. They're just saying what happened at that one
But
shot.
I get it. I mean, you want the quantitative numbers. You want to see them. It's like, you want to know why Kenny Perry hits a beautiful draw, right? Or Tom Lehman hits a beautiful draw. And why Brooks Koepka hits a bullet fade or whatever. And then you get the numbers. I get it. You're curious. You want to know it.
And I just think it's a camera in a sense, right? It can give you something to look at, but you can't say it's defining what's good and bad.
Look, get me wrong. I mean, when I said, and I got up in front of the teaching summit and called them a toy, you know, I probably stepped over the line there. They're not a toy. They're useful. They are. If I taught, I would use them. You know, you don't always get it right. But I think there I was pushing back against their prevalence amongst players, because I really do feel that there is a launch monitor golf swing and then there is a on-course golf swing. And I don't think they're the same.
Sure, this is where I think it comes to the use of it as well, right? Because sometimes people take the launch monitor on the course to see how that changes. So it's always about, how do you actually use technology? Are you applying it
Yeah, and I would say
dumbly and just saying this is going to give me the answers? Or are you just using it as a tool to have information and feedback and knowing its place and not letting it overextend that sort of place?
Tiger recently was doing a shoot with TaylorMade. The TaylorMade guys asked Tiger Woods how he was hitting this particular shot. He was hitting a 7-iron 100 yards, and he was hitting high draws that were hitting on the green and backing up. Then he was hitting high fades and backing up. We could sit here and try and do that for hours. We couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But he was doing it, and they asked him how he did it, and he said, I cannot tell you. It's just in my hands. So in the end, great golf is produced by feels, and it's in your hands, the best golf. And it's like, if that's what the very best iron player of all time is telling us, and I believe he's telling us the truth, that he feels it. It's a feel, okay? I don't really see Tiger Woods on the range very often looking in a track monitor,
Well,
in an iPad.
And I think this is a really important distinction as well, because obviously some of the best players of all time developed their game without any technology. So I don't think the argument is that you can't be a great player without technology, right? It's more about, in my opinion, as a coach, it's more about the person who's played for 10 years, 20 years, and isn't good. And they're trying to get better, right?
Yeah. And that's where I think technology we all have a high-speed camera right in our pocket, our phones. And so that player that you just mentioned can video their swings, go to YouTube, look at a Ben Hogan and say, what is Ben Hogan doing differently than what I'm doing? It's ubiquitous. We all have a high-speed camera.
Yeah.
But force plates now, when you have a player on we now know there is a little shift off the ball.
Yeah.
We know that from the pressure plates, and I like that we
knew it before.
We knew it before, but now it's like we now know that, hey, they do move off the ball. You cannot argue that a great swing goes immediately left.
And how
we know there's a little shift.
And how can you potentially use something as feedback for a person? Because again, it's like, if we're talking about the greatest players of all time, they may not need this to develop their game, right?
Right. Yeah.
But there's a lot of people at home watching in the world that want to get better at golf, and they've tried to hook it around a tree. They've tried to get better, and they've hit a wall. So it's like, why not use whatever potential feedback or diagnostic for that individual to get better? Because that's a population of people that are still very important, right?
Right, because, okay, so I agree, right? The launch monitors are good to an extent, but at least in my view, like the perfect distillation, in my view, the perfect teacher, the absolute perfect teacher, the one with the most knowledge, with the best communication skills, in my view, I'm imagining this teacher. He stands on the range with none of that equipment. He watches a player, and within a very short period of time, can reduce down to 1 or 2 thoughts that he can give that player that solves a lot of woes without a lot of esoteric talk, without a lot of complications. That is, in my view, that's the greatest teacher. And that takes years and years and years of experience and thought. And maybe he did have to look in a launch monitor forever to connect the quantitative with the qualitative. But the ideal teacher, in my view, doesn't use that. Doesn't need it.
Yeah.
Because he's seen it all, he knows it all, and it's right there.
Simpler you can make things obviously the better. A lot of these technologies that I know for high-level teachers, it's just running in the background. Oftentimes a student, it doesn't even see what the person's looking at, whatever it is, right? But different people respond to information differently. There are people who, a form of communication of, hey, look, see this number's negative, we want to make it positive, that may resonate with them. And this is where I think a great teacher, even though yes, they're trying to make it as simple as possible, what that exactly looks like for the individual in front of them may be different. Because the reality of it is a lot of people that we work with, like whether it be a successful business person or whatever, they may have an analytical mind that they actually may need a certain curiosity satiated first to actually free them up.
Maybe.
There's a little bit of a process that an individual may need to go to that is relative to that individual.
Maybe.
So I think this is where things, it's again, it's playing off the person in front of you and you're trying to communicate to them, but what's going to best communicate to an individual person in front of you is different.
Yeah, maybe, but I'll counter with the best golf is not played by analytical minds. It's played by the person who can access all of the nuances of the game when he's not thinking about technique. So early on with Tiger Woods, and we all know how analytical Tiger can be. You would know it better than anybody, how technical he can be. And one of the things I remember reading about Butch was that Butch would not let Tiger, nor would Hank let Tiger get as technical. Hank in particular wouldn't use video, and Butch wouldn't go down the technical sort of deep holes that Tiger wanted to go. They tried to keep the game as simple as possible for him. Jack Nicklaus similarly had, Jack Grout would see him once a year. They try to keep it as simple as possible. I don't know anybody that's played this game great who was thinking golf swing or positioning themselves before shots. I just don't know anybody that played it great that way. So if somebody is technically inclined, right, I get it. That's how you affect change.
Well, I think what I was saying was more along the lines of, I totally agree that that's the place in your mind that you need to be to play the best golf for you, wherever your swing is at.
Yeah.
It's not really the data, right? Because the data is dumb. It's just like, it is what it is. It's like, how do you change that is where it's up to us. So I think that to me is just an important distinction of where technology has this role. I think when we put technology at the top of like what makes our decision process, that's the issue.
Right.
That doesn't define good and bad. Again, the good and bad is going to be defined by the guys who actually hit the farthest, the people who control the ball the most. And that just maybe, just like a camera is allowing us to see what's happening with those people, that's just another way to see what's happening with those good ball strikers at that little moment of impact. And that's it.
100%.
Know the scope of it, don't extrapolate it farther out than that.
Yeah, agreed.
100%.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yeah. See?
All right.
Not that hard. I agree with you guys. You taught me into it. I don't hate you. I love you guys. See?
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
It's not a toy.